I'm Eleanor Walsh, 68 years old, a retired librarian who still believes every memory deserves its shelf. That morning, sunlight poured across my kitchen floor like any other day. I brewed my coffee, humming the same tune my husband used to whistle before heading to work. But when I opened the safe in my bedroom, our wedding pearls, the ruby brooch he'd given me on our 25th anniversary, everything was gone. My daughter-in-law, Julia, was standing by the doorway, her arms folded, calm as if nothing had happened. "We donated them. Mom," she said, voice sweet but sharp, "you never wear them. It was time to let go." The smell of coffee turned bitter in my throat. I looked at her, really looked, at the diamond earrings glinting on her ears. My diamonds. My hands stopped shaking. My voice didn't. "You're right, Julia," I said quietly. "I don't need them anymore." Then I closed the safe, turned the key, and looked her straight in the eye. "But you'll need a lawyer." After Julia shut my bedroom door that morning, the silence in the house felt heavy, like a book left open to the wrong chapter. I stood there for a long time, my hand still on the cold knob, wondering when my home had stopped sounding like mine. The smell of the coffee had turned bitter, so I poured it down the sink and watched the dark swirl circle the drain. That afternoon, I tried to do what I always did on Mondays, go to the library downtown and volunteer for the children's reading hour. Julia appeared at the doorway with my car keys dangling from her fingers. "You don't need to drive, Eleanor. Michael and I worry about your reflexes. I'll take them for now." Her tone was light, but the click of the keys landing in her palm sounded like a lock turning. I remember smiling, that polite, thin smile women my age wear when we know arguing will only feed the beast. "All right," I said, "but the kids will miss their story time." She shrugged. "They'll survive." For the first time in 30 years, I missed my slot at the library. The quiet that day was not peaceful, it was hollow. I baked lemon bread to fill the air, but even the scent felt wrong, like trying to perfume grief. The next week, I noticed Julia had rearranged the living room. My husband's chair, the oak recliner he had sanded by hand, was gone. When I asked, she said, "It was falling apart. I took it to donation. You should thank me." I wanted to scream that some things aren't supposed to be fixed or given away, that wear is proof of love. Instead, I nodded. At dinner that night, Michael complimented the open space. "It does make the room brighter," he said. I looked at him, at the man who used to help his father polish that same chair every Thanksgiving, and I realized he hadn't even noticed it was missing. Something inside me cracked then, quiet and invisible, but deep. Julia's campaign continued in small, careful strokes. She canceled my book club emails. "Too many spam links," she said, then replaced my phone with one she could monitor for safety. When friends stopped by, she greeted them at the door, saying I was resting or not feeling well. Soon, the visits stopped altogether. I started writing letters I never sent, little scraps of thought folded into an old recipe box. "Dear Helen, the house feels smaller these days, though nothing has changed except everything." It was my way of holding on to a voice that was slowly being talked over. One evening, while I was watering the violets by the window, I overheard Julia on the phone. Her voice carried through the hallway, low and quick. "Once the paperwork's signed, it'll be easier to manage her finances. He just needs to convince her it's for tax purposes." I froze, my hand hovering above the leaves. The drip of water onto the windowsill sounded like a ticking clock. Paperwork, finances, convince her. My name reduced to her. And when I stepped into the hall, she ended the call too fast. "Just the insurance company," she said, smiling too wide. "They're always confusing." I nodded again, but this time I felt something sharper than politeness rise in me, a thin blade of doubt. Later that night, I found the mail hidden under a stack of magazines. Among the envelopes was one addressed to me from the county tax office. It had been opened. Inside was a form about property ownership transfers. Julia had highlighted a section in yellow and written in the margin, "Discuss with Michael." I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the dark kitchen, the ticking of the old wall clock keeping time with my heartbeat. For years, I had thought age made you invisible, but it wasn't invisibility, it was erasure, done in polite whispers and forged smiles. The next morning, I tested something. I told Julia I might visit my sister for the weekend. She frowned. "That's too far. What if something happens?" I waited. "You mean to me or to the house?" I asked. Her eyes flickered for a second before she said, "Both." That was the moment the air changed between us. She began checking my pillbox, rearranging my schedule, calling the doctor's office herself. She told Michael I'd been forgetting things, small things, she said. The kind of small things that grow into legal reasons. I played along. I pretended to forget where I left my glasses, asked the same question twice at dinner, misnamed the neighbor's dog on purpose. If she wanted a fragile old woman, I would give her one, long enough to see where this story was heading. A week later, I heard her on the phone again, this time with Michael. "Mom needs structure," she said softly. "We should get the power of attorney signed. It's just paperwork, really." I stood in the hallway, holding my breath until my chest ached. When Michael came home that night, he avoided my eyes. "Julia thinks it'd be easier to handle bills if everything's in one name," he said. I poured him a glass of iced tea, steady hands despite the storm inside me. "Whose name? Michael?" I asked. He hesitated. "Ours? Joint?" I smiled the same small smile. "Of course." That evening, after they went to bed, I opened the old desk drawer and found my husband's address book. Inside was the number of Harold Pierce, his friend and former law partner. I traced the ink with my finger and whispered, "Looks like we're back in court. Harold." The next day, I called him. "I need advice," I said. "The quiet kind." He didn't ask for details. Harold never did. "Come by tomorrow," he replied. "Bring your papers." I hung up and felt a calm I hadn't known in months. For the first time since Julia and Michael moved in, I had a plan, and it started with telling no one. That night, as I locked the bedroom door, I looked at the empty space where the safe had been returned to its corner. I thought about my husband's steady hands building the shelves of this house, about the way he'd told me once, "Never let anyone decide for you what you're worth." I turned off the light and whispered to the dark, "I won't." Harold's office sat above an old bakery downtown, the kind of place that still smelled like cinnamon even after decades. When I walked in, he was standing by the window, a tall man in a beige suit that had seen more courtrooms than church pews. "Eleanor Walsh," he said, smiling softly. "Didn't think I'd see you back here unless you were volunteering to catalog my files." "I need a favor," I said. My voice was steady, but my fingers twisted the strap of my purse. "A quiet one." He gestured to a chair. "Quiet's what I do best." For the next half hour, I told him everything. Julia's new rules, the missing chair, the opened mail, the power of attorney papers. He didn't interrupt, just scribbled notes on a yellow pad. When I mentioned the missing jewelry, his pen stopped. "Did you file a report?" "No," I said. "Not yet. She's family." He sighed. "Family doesn't give you immunity. Ellie, it just makes the betrayal more personal." He slid a card across the desk. "This is a private investigator I trust. Discreet. Professional. and not cheap. But neither are memories. I left his office with that card tucked inside my wallet like a secret weapon. The investigator's name was Frank Mills, and when I met him 2 days later, he looked like someone who had seen too many truths to believe in easy lies. We met at a diner off Route 7. He ordered black coffee, no sugar. I told him about the jewelry, the missing documents, Julia's sudden control of my life. He listened, jotting small notes. "I can start by checking local pawn shops," he said. "If anything shows up, we'll trace the seller. You sure you want to go through with this?" I nodded. "I'm sure." That night, I felt something new, a pulse of purpose. I began sorting through my husband's old files, searching for receipts, photos, anything proving the jewelry was mine. In a folder marked Anniversary Gifts, I found faded Polaroids of me wearing the pearl necklace, the ruby brooch pinned to my coat, proof of ownership. Frank called 3 days later. "Found a lead. A pawn shop in New Haven logged a ruby brooch matching your description 2 weeks ago. Sold under the name Julia Bennett." My heart stuttered. "That's her maiden name." "I thought so," he said. "Want me to get photos?" "Yes, please." When the email arrived that evening, I opened it with shaking hands. There it was, my brooch, sitting in a glass case behind a price tag. The same one Ernest had given me the night he'd said, "You light up rooms better than rubies ever could." I saved the picture to a new folder on my desktop labeled Truth. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Julia's calm face and my brooch glittering under pawn shop lights. The next morning, I made breakfast as if nothing had happened: eggs, toast, coffee. When Julia came downstairs, she didn't look up from her phone. "Morning," she said. "Morning," I replied. "You're up early." "Got errands." She poured her coffee, scrolling. "Michael said you might sign those papers today. He's got a notary coming next week." "Is that so?" I said, sliding the toast onto a plate. My hands were steady. Inside, my pulse was not. She left soon after, the front door slamming like punctuation. I waited until her car disappeared, then opened my laptop again. I forwarded the photo to Harold with a short line. "Found it." "What's next?" His reply came within the hour. "We'll gather a full record. Photos, receipts, emails, bank activity. Don't confront her yet." But patience has never been my strong suit. That afternoon, Michael came home early. I asked him to sit. "Did Julia tell you she sold my jewelry?" He frowned. "What?" "No. Mom. She said you donated it. She even showed me the charity receipt." "May I see it?" He hesitated, then pulled a folded paper from his wallet. The logo said, Haven Hope Foundation. I typed it into my phone later. No such charity existed. That night, I went into the kitchen for water and found Julia at the table, whispering into her phone. "Yes, I'm handling it. The house will be in our name soon." I stepped into the doorway. "Who are you talking to?" She startled. "Michael, he's upstairs. Never mind." She grabbed her glass and brushed past me, her perfume thick and sweet like deceit. The next day, Frank sent more evidence, bank statements showing deposits from the pawn shop into Julia's personal account. I printed everything and hid it inside a cookbook on the top shelf, the one she never touched. That evening, Harold called. "Eleanor, we've got enough to press charges if we need to." I stared at the stack of papers. "Not yet. I want her to know I know. That's the punishment she'll understand." He chuckled softly. "Still the librarian who likes to teach lessons." "Old habits," I said. The following Sunday, Julia hosted dinner for a few neighbors. I helped set the table, quiet as always. When she wasn't looking, I slipped my phone onto the counter and pressed record. I caught her bragging to a friend about taking care of the old lady's estate. Her laugh sliced through me, thin and sharp. After everyone left, I went to my room, locked the door, and replayed the recording. The words were clear enough to break something final inside me. I sat on the bed, staring at the photo of Ernest on the nightstand. "You'd tell me to fight smart, wouldn't you?" I whispered. The silence answered yes. I pulled out the folder labeled Truth, photos, receipts, emails, audio. My hands no longer trembled. Tomorrow, I would call Harold again. It was time to move from gathering to acting. But that night, before sleep claimed me, I stepped into the hallway and looked down at the glow from Julia and Michael's room. Their laughter floated faintly through the crack of the door. I wondered if betrayal always sounded so casual before it turned into war. Harold called that Monday morning. His voice came through the receiver like a steady drumbeat. "Are you ready, Eleanor?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I said. He suggested we wait for formal legal notice, but I told him this needed to be personal before it became public. He sighed, then said, "All right. Make sure you have witnesses." So I called my other 3 children, David, Claire, and Anne, and invited them for dinner that Saturday. I told them it was just a family get-together, something we hadn't had since their father's passing. They were surprised, even pleased. Julia, on the other hand, seemed nervous. "Do we really need everyone here?" she asked while slicing vegetables. "It's time we were all under one roof again," I said. "You'll help me set the table?" She smiled, but her eyes darted. I noticed her hands tremble slightly as she arranged the silverware, my late husband's silverware, polished to a deceptive shine. The day of the dinner, the house buzzed with the old warmth I'd missed, the clatter of plates, the smell of roast chicken, the soft sound of Claire's laughter echoing from the hallway. Julia flitted from kitchen to living room, pretending hospitality but scanning every detail like a guard checking for weapons. She was right to be nervous. When the last guest arrived, I poured wine for everyone and waited until the plates were nearly empty. That's when I said, "Before dessert, I'd like us to listen to something together." The room quieted. Julia froze mid-motion, a dish towel in her hand. I pulled the small USB drive from my pocket and plugged it into the Bluetooth speaker Michael had installed last Christmas. The recording began, the muffled sound of Julia's voice from the dinner she hosted just a week ago. And taking care of the old lady's estate, once the paperwork's done, it's basically ours. The air in the room thickened. The words hung there, ugly and undeniable. Julia's face drained of color. "That's not... You took that out of context." "Context," I said evenly, "isn't kind to liars." I reached into my bag and placed a folder on the table. Inside were the printed photos, the pawn shop receipts, the bank statements, and copies of the fake charity forms. One by one, I slid them across the table toward Michael. He stared at the papers as though they were written in another language. "Julia, what is this?" she stammered. "It's all a misunderstanding. I just needed to cover a few expenses until the insurance came in. I was going to replace everything." "Replace memories?" I asked quietly. "Tell me, how do you refund a lifetime?" Michael's chair creaked as he leaned back. His hands trembled when he turned the pawn shop photo toward himself. The ruby brooch gleamed up from the page like an accusation. "Mom, is this real?" he whispered. I nodded. Frank Mills, a licensed investigator, documented every step. Harold confirmed the legal trail. The money went into her personal account. Julia's lips parted, searching for air. "You had me followed." "I had my truth found." Claire gasped softly, and David muttered something under his breath about calling the police. But I raised a hand. "Not yet." Julia stood abruptly. I'm not listening to this ambush. Michael, we're leaving. Michael didn't move. His gaze stayed fixed on the papers. Sit down, Julia. She froze, unaccustomed to that tone. When she finally sat, I spoke again, calm but sharp. Julia, this is what's going to happen. You will return the value of what you stole, including the jewelry. You will sign a written agreement surrendering any claim to this house, and you will leave tonight. That's blackmail, she hissed. No, I said. It's consequence. The silence that followed was deep enough to make the ticking wall clock sound like thunder. Harold, on speakerphone, cleared his throat. I'm here as a witness, he said. You have two choices, Miss Bennett, comply voluntarily, or face charges under elder abuse statutes. Your decision. Julia's shoulders sagged, tears filled her eyes, but there was no apology in them, only anger that she'd been caught. Michael, she pleaded, you can't let her do this to me. Michael rubbed his temples, his face pale. You did this to yourself. He took the pen Harold had sent and laid it in front of her. She hesitated for a long, trembling second before signing the paper. The scratching of ink sounded final. When it was done, she pushed back her chair, wiping her cheeks. You'll regret this, she whispered. Maybe, I said, but at least I'll regret it in peace. She stormed out, the front door slamming so hard a picture frame rattled on the wall. The room stayed silent until Anne reached over and took my hand. Mom, why didn't you tell us sooner? Because I needed you to see the truth for yourselves, I said. Not through my words, through her actions. Michael sat quietly for a long time, staring at the signature on the page. Then he stood, walked to me, and dropped to his knees beside my chair. I'm sorry, he said, voice cracking. I should have seen it. I should have protected you. I placed a hand on his head, the way I used to when he was little. You're protecting me now. He nodded, tears falling freely. Claire got up and started clearing dishes, and the rest followed, wordless, moving through the motions of family like trying to remember a forgotten dance. When the house finally quieted, I walked to the kitchen window. Outside, the night air carried the faint sound of crickets. For the first time in months, I could breathe without feeling watched. Michael appeared beside me, holding 2 cups of tea. She's gone, he said softly. I nodded. Good. Tomorrow, we call Harold again. We'll make it official. He looked at me, guilt and relief mixing in his eyes. What happens now? I sipped my tea, the warmth steadying my hands. Now we start over, but not the same way. He nodded. Then, almost to himself, he whispered, Dad would have been proud of you. I smiled faintly. He always liked a good courtroom ending. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I walked through the quiet house. The walls seemed to exhale, lighter somehow. I stopped by the safe, my safe, and ran my fingers along its cool metal surface. For the first time, it wasn't fear that kept me awake. It was freedom. The following week, Harold drew up the final documents. Julia's signature was verified, her name erased from every claim. She packed the rest of her things in silence while Michael watched from the porch. She didn't look back when she left, and I didn't wait at the window to see her go. 2 months later, the pawn shop returned most of my jewelry after the investigation confirmed the sale was fraudulent. The ruby brooch came home first. I placed it in the safe, not because of its worth, but because of what it had survived. Michael moved into a small apartment downtown, the one Julia had transferred to settle the debt. He repainted the walls himself, said it made the place feel new. We spoke every evening, sometimes about bills, sometimes about memories, often about nothing at all, just the comfort of knowing we were both breathing easier. Life found its rhythm again. I rejoined my book club, started volunteering at the library on Fridays. The house was quiet, but it was my quiet now. One afternoon, while dusting the bookshelf, I found an old envelope tucked behind a photo frame. It was a letter from Ernest, written years before he passed. If you ever feel cornered, Ellie, remember, your strength isn't in the fight, it's in knowing when to stand your ground. I smiled through the tears. That evening, I brewed tea, opened the safe, and looked at the jewelry glinting softly under the light. They no longer felt like trophies. They were reminders of survival. I closed the door gently and whispered, "You were right, Ernest." I stood my ground. Then I turned off the lamp, the house settling around me. Safe at last. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.